All right, I thought I'd do a couple musings on masculinity and so on. So, what is biblical masculinity exactly? Right? It's clear to anyone that masculinity must involve being physically dangerous on some level, or intellectually sophisticated and dangerous enough to make aggressive, hostile targets think twice, and so on. It could be as simple in the intellectual sphere as being convincing when you're bluffing, or it can mean something as defensive as just being able to take hits physically. I am a type of person who's had an unstable experience of masculinity for some time and grown into a more pacifistic sort of style of approach. But I'm always keeping in my back pocket the possibility of going berserk in a fight. I don't want to go berserk. I don't want to get into a situation where that's necessary to save my life or the life of another or something like that. It's unpleasant to me now compared to before. I enjoy the blessedly peaceful life now. Of course, I am older now, and before when I was a young blood, I was more into the fight and so on. But even as I'm older and less capable, I guess, I still find a little bit of pride in the fact that I could fight really well in the past. And so far, I've been mentioning masculinity in the ability to harm others, basically, physically, or scare them off mentally, or something like that. But I've also mentioned tanking the hits, taking the hits, tanking the hits, and so on. Part of masculinity does mean destroying evil. It does mean destroying evil people and so on. Part of it inescapably means smiting the wicked. Sorry, there was a hair on my tongue. But I think it's safe to say that our society at the moment has a certain degree of overemphasis on smiting perceived wicked people, and an overemphasis on the enjoyment of inflicting suffering on others and so on. It's a narcissistic enthusiasm or obsession, and while one should rejoice in fighting evil and be glad they're on the right side, I think there's not enough serious contemplation of what good and evil actually mean, and experiences of doing good versus doing evil to others and so on. There's a reason why in the Bronze Age, or the Iron Age, when Jesus was around, he emphasized repaying evil with good, and so on. I don't know if this is an absolute command of Jesus's that you have to do it all the time necessarily, or else you're bad yourself. But my instinct tells me it's not. I think it was the prudentialist, or one of his guests basically pointed out that the word for when Jesus says love your enemy, there's two different words in Greek that could be used for enemy in English. When he says love your enemy, he's talking about someone you have a personal gripe with. He's not using the word for like a traitor to your society, like a psychopathic murderer or something like that, or a mass murderer, or a struggle snuggler of the mass or child variety or whatever. Those people can be smited just fine. It's the person you personally hate the guts of because you just don't like the way they look or something, or they snubbed you at one point or something like that. Those are the ones you're supposed to love, even if they do wrong by you. So there is a phrase by Jesus, and his last words in the book of Revelation are, "Let the wicked be wicked, or let the righteous be righteous, and the wicked be wicked." Or maybe it's "Let the wicked be wicked, and the righteous be righteous." But the point is, don't do evil deeds in the name of fighting evil. And my point isn't that violence is always wrong, because C.S. Lewis was not a pacifist, and he goes into detail. And there's a YouTube channel called C.S. Lewis Doodle, Doodle, C.S. Lewis Doodle. And his last two videos so far, latest two videos, are C.S. Lewis Part 1 and 2, Why I Am Not a Pacifist. And one of the things C.S. Lewis says is you should be happy to fight evil, and you shouldn't have a pseudo-pacifism of, like, I gotta fight, but I'm not happy about it, and so on. You should be happy when smiting evil on some level. But to be happy when smiting evil versus being a cruel, sadistic asshole to everyone around you is a bit of a thin line for many people. And it would be good if we had more people studying the classics and understanding the realities of violence and so on. Because I had an encounter a couple of years back with someone that was basically Fed posting about how we need violent revolution and so on. And basically, I came to the conclusion that he was talking like someone that's never been punched in the face. He was a NEET LARPing as a revolutionary. NEET, not in employment, education, or training. And LARP stands for live action role playing, which is kind of like it's kind of like sword fighting, but with foam swords, which if you have a strong enough foam sword and it's big enough and you swing it hard enough, it can break your arm, basically. But it's not a real steel, iron, metal blade that can cut you up and kill you so much. And so LARP has a bad reputation of meaning someone that wants to pretend to be the real thing while not actually courageous enough to be the real thing, or intelligent enough to be the real thing, or whatever you want to call it, capable enough of being the real thing, but they want the credit for being the real thing. And I've said this before, but the fetishization of certain aspects of the human condition, like the James Lindsay and Jordan Peterson fetishizing classical liberalism to mean progressive or secular liberalism, or McIntyre pointed out recently, or the fetishization of revolution from people who have never engaged in violence or had violence done to them, basically, is a real problem. People that don't know what they're talking about in the realm of violence and think it's all going to go their way and so on. There's a bit of pointed wisdom on the reality of warfare and so on. And that is, you or anyone can start a war, but the say on when to stop it belongs to the enemy. The enemy gets a vote in whether or not to stop a war, even if you have all the capability to start it. And that's an important thing to remember when you want to start violence. Granted, if the other side starts the violence, right, there's another set of pointed wisdom on the more aggressive direction, which is someone bragging, I don't start fights, I end fights. And that's a good motto to have, and so on. A very strong motto to have. Basically, that's what I'm looking to be myself, in a way. Um, but another part of masculinity is also, as opposed to the aggressive fighting side of things and so on, is that you suffer the dreary jobs and the work conditions and the harshness of the outside world and so on, doing the necessary things to bring home the bacon, so to speak, literally food and stuff, for your family so that they can relax and have peace and enjoy themselves and go to school and go shopping and possibly volunteer for charity and so on, in relative comfort and ease and so on. There's a certain degree of Jordan Peterson's work that is actually reasonably good, which is that the highest achievers and the most masculine men up here sacrifice themselves to achieve as much good as possible at the top so that they can bring some of that goodness down to the people on the bottom. There is a masculinity to that that is appropriate and so on. Now, it might be the women and children volunteering for charity on their, because they're not going to school or they're a stay-at-home wife or something like that, that will bring the goodness directly to the lowest common denominator or the lowest rung of society and so on. But the man, again, is the one that provides the bacon so that the woman can distribute the bacon to the poor and oppressed and so on, or the suffering, or whatever you want to call them. And women love those kinds of men. Even though I say that I wish for a baby girl or my ex-girlfriend to come back and take care of me and rescue me from poverty, I don't want to sit there. I want to get a physical job that pays okay money, not much necessarily, but a physical job so I can physically exercise to get in shape again. Buy a couple weights, 5 to 10 pounds, and gradually work my muscles up over here so that I can get back to push-ups and stuff like that, and sit-ups and so on. And do my own YouTube career, entertaining and educating people or something like that. Basically, that's my plan for my hopeful revitalization of my life and taking a direction in life that is more productive and so on. Even if she initially makes more money than I do, I look to make as much money or more than her, or we do a joint operation on YouTube as one channel or something like that. We'll both contribute, and that makes the money for the most part. I don't know if any of that's reasonable or realistic or it's going to happen or not or anything like that, but that's my hope. And that's what I'm grounding myself on the possibility of, basically. Anyways. That's just a little personal insight into my mentality and the concrete steps I want to take, possibly, if I can, if I have the opportunity to, and so on, in regards to what I'm talking about. As for the fighting element and the smiting evil element, I am much more inclined now towards peaceableness and so on, but I'm keeping my berserk rage potential in the back pocket in case it's necessary, because I live in a rough neighborhood and so on, and I don't want to see someone get hurt who's innocent if I can do something about it. And I'm more afraid of getting smitten by God for doing the wrong anger, for being angry at the wrong time, than I am of some punk with a knife at this point. So it's not necessarily that I'm scared to fight and face death entirely. Although I'm a little bit more now because I faced death and it's a little scary, admittedly, and I'm kind of like, oh my god, that's what it means. Oh boy, that's really scary and painful because I've faced it and experienced that pain and like physical agony and so on. But that's why I've got the berserk rage in my back pocket, so that when the time comes, if necessary, I can fight like the devil and be like Guts from Berserk or Achilles or the Doom Slayer or whatever, or John Wick or Rambo or Sisu, or you get the point. You know, in a fight, basically, against someone with a knife or a machete or a baseball bat or something, if necessary. Um, but if I become berserk like that, then it basically means I've given up any hope of settling things peacefully and for the safety of the innocent or myself without destroying the enemy. And it's going to take a fair bit to prod me into berserk rage because I know how serious it means to visit that kind of violence on someone else, because I've experienced that by doing it to myself at what I thought was God's command. So I understand just how serious that kind of level of violence is and so on. So I'm a little burned and twice shy of violence and so on, but I recognize it's sometimes necessary for the good of humanity to be violent towards the wicked. At the same time, we should be careful about who we consider wicked, and sometimes it's better to rely on the police than to engage in something yourself. And at the same time, we should be careful not to be total cowards, but step up when necessary for the sake of the innocent, and to put an end to a fight by ending the aggressor, and letting them start the fight if they feel the need to, and then if we feel the need to, putting an end to them, basically. And that means just war theory from St. Augustine, and that means executions of criminals, and that means Daniel Penny and Kyle Rittenhouse and so on. So that's kind of how I approach it. But personally, I am much more in favor of the gentle Jesus, meek and mild sort of approach to my fellow man, even while I'm worried about living so close to rough neighborhoods and so on. And just focusing on being charitable to those in need and keeping myself solid, basically.